So how do you design promo graphics for difficult book covers? It's probably the question I get most frequently anytime I talk about promo graphics, Facebook ads, newsletter headers, things like that. A lot of authors are in this situation for different reasons. Sometimes they have a book with a publisher and they want to promote it, but the publisher won't give them the files. So they find it difficult to make promo graphics out of it, especially using the method, my go-to method, which is to take the cover art from the book itself and use it as the background for the Facebook ad, for the cover photo, for whatever promo graphic you're creating. I usually like to start with the Facebook ad and then build out from there. But sometimes the publishers won't give you the files because they're just being difficult. Sometimes there's a genuine rights issue. And authors might run into that themselves, even with their self-published work. They might commission a piece of art and they don't have the rights to use it in a promotional sense, or maybe they purchase a photo or an image from a stock photo site and they have restrictions around what you can do with the image, and they might be faced with paying an additional fee or breaking the license if they use it in the background of their Facebook ad. Some photo sites are more difficult than others. But sometimes it's simply the design of the book cover itself or the image doesn't lend itself to being a good background. Or sometimes you can't get a hold of your cover designer. They're backpacking around Brazil or something. You know, it happens. The solution to all those situations is more or less the same. And what I like to do in such situations is to use stock photos. And I will show you a site later on in the video where you can get stock photos very cheaply and you don't have to worry about rights. You don't have to worry about whether you have permission to use them in a Facebook ad or on your website, or even in things like merch. So there are very wide-ranging licenses for all the typical uses that an author will get up to in a promotional sense. And we're going to look at a few different examples today. So I'm sharing my screen here with you, and we're going to take a look at one photo-based cover and one illustration-based cover, just to give you a kind of a broad range and to see how you handle both of those situations. And then hopefully you can apply it to your own situation. But what I wanted to do before I started that was to just run over my go-to method again and then show you why it won't work on certain images. Okay, so we're going to start off with Rock Gods and Messy Monsters by Diane Katz. And this is a novel. Let's open it up on Amazon. If I remember correctly, it's a satire set in the 90s record industry, which is a good setup. But I think it has speculative elements as well. Oh yeah, aliens have hatched a rock star, brain extractions, falling body parts. Okay. Now, the reason why I wanted to start off with Diane's book is because this is a very easy one to use my go-to method. So let's just get rid of this link, and I'll do this very, very quickly. So Diane has sent the cover, which is an illustrated cover. Sometimes they're a bit trickier, but in this case, she has provided, or her designer has kindly provided. Let's pull this to the front. This is the book cover without the lettering, which is what I recommend you request off the designer. And sometimes they'll even give you a few more files, like something like this can be very useful. If we just get rid of this for a second, move this to the front, where this is probably either the original illustration or the illustration that was made to do a wraparound kind of book cover for a paperback or a hardback. But what this allows us to do is to have a very easy background to do our typical square Facebook ad image. By the way, some of you might point out in the comments, so I'm going to beat you to it. You don't necessarily have to have a square image on Facebook, by the way. If that's the problem you're facing following this method, you don't really have to. Now, Facebook actually has changed its recommendations recently to have a slightly more vertical image. And I'll be talking about that in a future newsletter, so stay tuned for that. But if you do have a slightly awkward shape, you can try uploading it, especially if you're just running the ads to the Facebook feed. You might, if you're an old-time Facebook advertiser, you might remember the old letterbox shaped image, 1200 by 628 pixels. And now, in the last few years, the recommendation has been to go for this kind of Instagram-like square of 1080 by 1080 pixels. But Facebook has changed things again now where they want a slightly taller image, or they recommend it because it does so well on mobile. It just takes up more of the real estate, more of the screen. So it attracts more clicks from users. So that's something you can explore, especially if you have an image which lends itself to that shape a bit better. Okay, I won't go into that in too much detail because I will be doing it in a future newsletter. Anyway, as you can see, this image is going to work quite well. So we'll do this quickly and then we'll move on to the more difficult covers where this technique won't work so well. Now, the only problem you have with something like this, which is a few basic kind of primary colors and everything is kind of blending in, is just making sure that the cover doesn't melt into the background too much. So what I usually do first of all here is go up to edit, and then I go across to effects and click shadows. And you can either do a drop or you can do a glow. I usually go with the glow because it just puts that shadowed edge all the way around instead of doing it more kind of realistically as if it is a shadow from a light source. This one does it on all sides. And you can see there, it provides that shadow, and it gives it a bit more depth. It makes it look a little bit less flat, and also provides the contrast between the two whites. And it just lifts it off the background, and so it doesn't blur into it that much. And then you're almost there. All you really need is a price tag, and if you want to put in a tagline, you have a lovely space to do it there, or a nice review quote. But I'm just going to do this quickly and just put in a price tag. So what I do, by the way, for that, in case you didn't watch the first couple of episodes, is I just grab a square here and I manipulate it into the shape that I want. It's automatically pulled the yellow. Canva has gotten so clever now that I used to have to do that kind of thing manually. I'd get the color picker, I would go over to the face, I would get the exact hex code, put that in, match it all up. Canva does it automatically now. It just makes your life easier and easier all the time. And then I would just put the price there. And you have a pretty basic but pretty effective Facebook ad image. And then I would build out from that. I would just convert that into the appropriate size for a newsletter header, for website graphics, for social media teasers, whatever I wanted to do. I'll just put the price in quickly. So let's say it's on sale at $1.99 or something like that. Move this up here, and don't forget to change away from the unattractive, with all due respect, Canva Sans font. It especially doesn't look good, in my opinion, for numbers. You have to choose your font carefully for numbers. If I was making this properly for myself, I would spend quite a bit of time probably trying to match up the exact font, but I'm going to go for something that I know kind of looks a bit similar. So that doesn't look too bad. The only thing that looks bad there, in my opinion, is the $sign. So we're going to copy this, change that into a $sign, and then make it a bit smaller. And if you've watched a few episodes of this, you know I like my small currency signs. I have a strange belief that not only are they cuter, I think it subliminally makes people feel like the book is cheaper because the $sign is smaller, which might be total rubbish, but I do it nonetheless. Now, if I want to zoom in there and just get this a bit more accurate, pull it up a little bit. And there we go. I think that's quite all right. One thing I do like to do, though, is use a brighter yellow than this. Now, this is got a little bit of a blue hue to it and matches perfectly with the stylized image. But just to make it pop a little bit more, because this isn't an art project, this is very much a commercial enterprise, I would make it a tiny bit more canary yellow. Just so your eye isn't attracted first to this lady's face or the hair or whatever, that you see the price first, because that's the first thing I want readers to see. I want them to know this book is on sale and that they should click on the ad and check it out on Amazon, and everything else is of secondary importance for me, as long as it's the right kind of reader clicking on it. I just want that click. Okay, so I think that's a pretty decent looking Facebook ad, and I could certainly build out a whole brand identity from that, in terms of website graphics, in terms of social media teasers and everything else. So and you have a lovely space here to put in a nice review quote. Always go for something that helps nail down the genre a bit more, especially something like this where the genre mightn't be immediately clear, or where you're kind of straddling a couple of genres, it might be good to put in a quote maybe that brings out the speculative elements. So make sure you're attracting the right readers. That's the way I would go there. Or if the tagline does that job, I would put it in here. And I would just take another rectangle like this, just copy it. I would make it a bit thinner. I would pull it up here so that something like that, and I put in the quote there. I think that could work quite well. Or you could take the color from the author name here, just so that it's not too much yellow. And then you could do it in orange and with either black or maybe slightly different shade text. And yeah, that's the way I would go. But I'd be tempted to even leave it like this and just test that version. Okay, so that's an example of a book cover where we can use my go-to method, and you can see it was quite quick to do. I'd probably spend a bit more time fussing on it because I'm that kind of person, but I think it's in pretty good shape right now. I'd probably play with the shape of this, maybe some rounded edges or something. It looks a bit square, but otherwise I think it's pretty good. So let's move on. Okay, we're going from the 90s to the 80s, and we're going from the world of the record industry to the media industry. I believe this is the story of an inadvertent time traveler, a radio host or a tabloid journalist or someone like that, who ends up back in 1980s London. This is 1980 by Jason Ayres, and I believe it's the first in a 5 or 6 book series, something like that. 7 books, okay. And I think Jason said he designed the cover himself, and the books have been selling very well, and he's got a strong series branding here that's clearly working for him and that is attracting his target audience. So we don't want to mess with that too much. We want to find something that fits with this. But here's the problem. If I wanted to do my go-to method, and let's get rid of this link, we don't need that anymore, you might see the problem right away. The only cover art we have to work with, unlike the last time where we had that lovely wraparound cover art, which enabled us to fill our square canvas fairly well, you might see fans of spatial reasoning might already be ahead of the game here in terms of what the issue is going to be. So we fill the space with our background so there's no white space. And now what do? We're covering up one of the elements. It just doesn't feel right. Now, if I spent all day on this, I could probably find a way to make it work. But who has the time when there's a much better solution out there? So what I would recommend in a situation like this, and it's going to be similar with the next cover, with photo-based romance, I think it is, just to show you that this is an issue across all genres and that these lessons are applicable across all genres. So this might be a time travel. I think it's actually a satire. I think it's like the kind of humor of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So I might check it out myself because I do love Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and that style of humor. Anyway, so what I would do in this situation is I would go to my favorite stock photo site, which is Deposit Photos. And the reason why I like Deposit Photos is it's one of the bigger ones. I think, there's a few big ones out there, like Shutterstock is another one, but Shutterstock is incredibly expensive. And Deposit Photos is much more reasonable. You see, this is their deal that they have right now, which is 100 images. So they've got photos and they've got vector graphics and all that. 100 images for €65. But I will show you a much better deal. In fact, I'll put the link in the description. It certainly will be running for the next week or two. And it is AppSumo. Now, AppSumo, I've been using AppSumo for 8 or 9 years, and I probably built half my business using tools that I bought on AppSumo. And you see here, they're doing the same deal for $39. And there's a couple more perks from buying it via AppSumo. You get the credits last for a lifetime. So I think on Deposit Photos, sometimes the credits can expire. So if you don't use up your 100 photos, they can expire after a certain amount of time. With AppSumo, they never expire. So you can buy 100 photo credits, work through them slowly over several years, and there's no issue at all. And plus, if you change your mind, with all their stuff, they have a 60-day money-back guarantee. This isn't a sponsored video. I just love using AppSumo, and I love using deposit photos, and I love solving expensive problems with a cheap solution, which is what this is. So let's get back into designing our cover. So we want 80s pattern, I guess. Don't know why I'm using all caps. So let's find some kind of 80s pattern. We got lots to choose from here, actually. Something super 80s, I think, is going to work here. Okay, so you can see I have 244 credits left because I like to buy lots of credits because I use lots of stock photos. And you can stack as many credits as you want, by the way. I will put my link in the description. That is an affiliate link, so I will get a small commission if you buy something. Doesn't change the price you're paying. In fact, right now, I think it's the lowest price this has ever been. So you're getting a good deal, in my opinion. Now, yeah, they don't just have photos. So this is the point I wanted to make here in terms of an illustrated cover like this. So this is an illustrated cover, whereas the other one we're going to look at later on is a photo-based cover. So stock photo sites do more than photos. They have what are called vector graphics. They have illustrations as well. If you have, like, let's say, an epic fantasy cover where you have some kind of illustration, but you can't use the background art for one of the reasons I mentioned, then you can come here and try and get something with a similar style that will match up. They also have, video, music, sound effects, all this stuff if you create content and make videos. But what I'm interested in here now is the 80s patterns. And every time you download an image here, you will use up one of your credits. But you can download a photo without using up one of your credits, and they'll put a watermark in it. And you can just do that when you're testing. And this is what I often do. Like, for example, let's say we like the look of this kind of purple one here, right? And what I can do is just right click on it, save image as, and then I'll save it into my computer, test 80s. And then I go into Canva, and let's get rid of this background because it's not going to work for us. Hit uploads, upload files. And then here's my test 80s. And now I can put it in the background. And if you zoom in, you'll see it has a watermark on it, meaning that you can't use it. You can't, use this as your fake book. You see it there, deposit photos. And so if you try and use this in a book cover or a Facebook ad or on your website, you might get an email from somebody's lawyer saying, hey, you didn't pay for that image. So don't do that. Only do this for your own testing. So you're allowed to do this. They even say it on their site. You can download the images with the watermark. You can use them for testing. Graphic designers often do this if they're mocking up a cover for a client. They will get a few different stock photos or stock images, and they will see which one the client wants. Then they will go and pay for the stock image. So in this case, we're only just seeing if it works with our color palette. And here's one thing you can do to help with that. So let's say you really wanted this background image. You're like, this screams 80s. I just want to use it. But the colors don't quite match. You see, Jason's gone with a kind of a more muted color palette here, and he's carried that across the series. So we want to match this a little bit more. How do we do that when these are very bright, kind of neon kind of colors and still retain that 80s feel? Well, the great thing with Canva is now that you can actually change the colors in the image, which is such a cool feature to have. So let's say you're like, this pink is a bit too much. I want something that matches this kind of blue and this kind of yellow a bit better. Well, here's a little trick for you. Go to a site, unless you have a natural talent for matching colors, which I do not have. I use this site, which is free, called Coolers. It's like colors with an extra O in there, coolers.co, all right? And you can put in any color and it will tell you what matches with it. So let's do exactly that. Let's take the colors from the cover. So let's take the blue. So we just click on that, click on this plus sign over here, take the hex code, that's the exact code of the color, and we'll put it into the color generator. And watch this is pretty nifty. So we put it in, so this is tech blue. And if you want to get really depressed, you can look up why it's called that. Let's lock this down, and then you just hit the space bar. And it will tell you these are colors that match with that blue. So that's cool. We got a red here that might work, like tomato jam, thought they said toe jam for a second. Tomato jam, aquamarine. Let's copy that one. I'm going to make a little list of these because we might need a few. Okay, so what's this? Aquamarine. Because we got to match more than one color there, not just the blue. But watch what you can do here as well. So if we go to, where are we? Where's our design? Right, we can take the yellow as well. So we don't want to do that. Sorry. I've done it again. Right. So, we pick it up here in the top bar. Click on that yellow. Click on the plus sign just so we can get the hex code. And we can put that into coolers as well in the second row here. So you lock a color down with this padlock thing here. So that's vanilla custard. I love the names of these colors. Who comes up with the names of these colors? I really do love them. And now you'll see these two are locked in place and it's picking out 3. And you can just keep clicking the space bar until you get something that's going to work for you. Like I want to take this because this is a bright color. So we'll still retain that 80s feel, but have something which kind of clashes a little less. So I'm just going to write this one down, red, aquamarine. And maybe this periwinkle, that could work. Periwinkle. And let's get maybe just one more just in case. Because, when you put them into the design itself, maybe they won't look as good. So it's good to have a few options. Plus we got a few colors to fill in anyway. And we'll get something like this, light sea green, perfect. So this is the green. Okay, I've written down all these hex codes and now we're going to drop them into our design because Canva actually lets you change the colors of the stock photo that you downloaded. So I just click here on the color on the top bar, go to that plus sign again, and then drop in the hex code of the one I want to use. So I'm going to change the green in that stock photo image to this green there. And now I'm going to change the pink to this red that they said matches it a bit better. So let's do that. So you can see it's just very subtle changes, but that red matches that kind of more primary blue a bit better. And now we're going to change this. Let's get a bit of periwinkle in there just because I like saying the word from this color, whatever it is, this kind of lilac. Let's see what this periwinkle looks like. And did we do the aquamarine? I don't think we did. Let's drop in the aquamarine for this. Actually, Joe, instead of this, I'm going to put in the aquamarine. I think that might be nice. Yes, I like that. Or no, maybe the purple matches more. Yeah, let's keep the lilac. Okay, so now we've changed just a few of the colors. I think it matches a little bit better. And you can do the same with, if you fancied one of the other images a bit better, you could pick out, this or this, and you can download it with the watermark. So you haven't used up one of your credits. You haven't committed to anything yet. And then when you're finally happy with your design, you can go back, download the photo properly, reinsert it, go through the steps again. And that way, then you don't waste a lot of stock photo credits just, going through various images. And then all you need to do, if you want to finish off this ad, let's say you wanted to do something like that, you just pick out one of the colors, like I think the red here. I wouldn't use a blue for a price tag, but there's a bit of research has been done on this. I'm sure I've mentioned this in one of the other episodes, but people generally click on things, are more likely to click on something if it's red with white text on it. And then the second most likely color to attract clicks is yellow with black text on it. And then I think it's black with yellow text on it, but that's going well into the distance. The red and the more kind of fire engine kind of red and the more canary yellow they are, the more likely they are to attract clicks. So I always lean towards those colors if I can get them into a button in an email or a price tag in a Facebook ad. If I can work in those colors, I will take every opportunity to do so. And when I do my own testing, that definitely bears out because the artist in me rebels against this kind of idea that we always have to use a certain color, especially if it clashes with the composition or the ad image or whatever. I'm just going to use the same font as last time because I think it's a really nice one for numbers. It does them nice and cleanly. Now you can, in this kind of case, you might say, well, I want to do a really 80s kind of font, and you can search through Canva. There's so many different fonts, especially if you have the pro plan, you have an infinite number of fonts and you can import whatever fonts you want. But on the free plan, you have a more limited choice, but I think, you'll probably find some more 80s looking font there. I know they have like some kind of retro Space Invaders type font and a few things like that. Sometimes you can go a bit too far in terms of having a stylized font, which might look cool in an artistic sense, but it might make it very difficult to read. And remember, your main aim with a Facebook ad image is to stop the scroll, right? People are there on their phones, they're scrolling away, and you want something to leap out at them, and you want it to leap out at the right people. You don't want it to just grab the attention of everybody. You want to find your target market, and I'd say the target market for this kind of book is people who are nostalgic about the 80s. I had a quick peek at the reviews on Amazon. They were filled with people saying, oh, it's so nice to go back to the time when I was happiest or when I was young or whatever. I think, it's whenever you were 25, I think is the time people kind of think back to, when they had less responsibilities and burdens, and maybe they could get a good night's sleep, even lying on the floor if they wanted to. Whereas when you get a bit older, if you use the wrong pillow, your back is out of action for a month. But yes, so yeah, something like that, I think could work very well. I would probably, looking at it now, change the font so that it's not such a clash with the title font here. And one thing I'd probably do, because I don't like having the two sets of numbers in a line with each other, I usually like putting the price in the top left or top right. But in this case, I think I would... See, that's a handy trick, by the way. You select everything, group it together, then you can move it as one. I would probably do it down here, which is not what I normally do, but because I don't like the letters being in a line with each other like that. Or you can do it somewhere in the middle, something like that. Also works. But it doesn't have to be a square, by the way. So let's ungroup that, right? Let's pick up the square. And if you click edit on any shape, you can just change it to something else. So like you could do something like this, if you something like this, or you can pick whatever shape you want. You can do something like do we have some kind of funky shape that might work for kind of an 80s vibe? Something like that's a bit kind of 70s, 60s. I'd probably go for a more rounded thing there. That might kind of work. Yeah, you have a bunch of options anyway. Let's group those together again so we can move it around easily. Something like that could kind of work too. I don't think that's so bad. And then I would do my usual here, and I do it almost all of the time, where I put in the shadow and almost always a glow. And you can see now, before I did that, it looked a bit out of place, like it's just been slapped on. But after you add it in, just giving it that little bit of shadow just makes it all look a little bit more organic. Now, I would probably play around with that quite a lot to get colors which seem to match a little bit more. I'd probably mute some of the colors down so that it still had the 80s design, but the colors were a bit more muted, like the cover is. But I think, that's a decent starting point for a good ad that will jump out to people who are nostalgic or who pine for the 80s, which is the target market for the book. Okay, let's move on. Okay, next up is a completely different kind of book. It's a romance. I think it's romance, women's fiction, that kind of area. Rocky Mountain Heat, romance, I'm guessing by the title, by Giulia, Skye. Okay, now where's the link? Now, this is a really common design challenge for romance authors in particular, but quite a few other genres too. Because romance authors, or romance novels, as I'm sure you are aware, often have a couple in some kind of clinch. It's a pretty strong signifier that a book is a romance novel or has a strong romantic element. And the problem with that, in terms of my go-to method, as you're probably going to guess already, and I'm sure lots of romance authors struggle with this themselves, is that where do you put the book without covering up the couple? And the couple is the last thing you want to cover up because that's the big signifier of the genre. And what you're always trying to do, I don't want to speak too much about romance specifically because I'm not a romance reader, but I know enough romance authors to understand some of the struggles they face with these kind of things. But with any book, regardless of the genre, what you want to do with all of your marketing, your written marketing and your visual marketing, is you always want to double down, you niche down on genre. You always want to communicate genre every opportunity you get, with your series title, with your author title, with your blurb. And all of that is true for romance as well. Only probably turned up to 11, where they're also trying to communicate all the tropes that the book leans on. That's really important in terms of marketing for romance authors. But the general point for all genres is that you always want to communicate genre. If you've got an opportunity to communicate your genre in the title, like I presume it's no accident that Giulia has picked the word heat to go into her title here to indicate the spice level of the book, presumably. But anytime you have a chance to do that, where you can communicate the genre and even better, the subgenre, like she's done here, then that is golden. And you should be doing it with, if you choose a review quote to put on a poster or to put in an ad or on your website, it shouldn't just be one that says you're amazing and your book is amazing. It should be one that also mentions the genre. Like, this thriller is a rip-roaring success. If it's an epic fantasy, or if it's science fiction, or if it's cyberpunk, or whatever it is, if you can get them to say nice things about you, if you can find a quote among your reviews or where it also mentions the genre as well as something complimentary about your book, that's the one I would always lean towards. And I would lean more towards a quote that mentions the genre than one that is absolutely glowing or from some august publication, because I think they're just more effective. Anytime I do testing and I try different taglines or different ad text on Facebook, the one that stresses the genre always does best. Now, moving on from that point, clearly I'm just trying to buy time because I don't know what to do here. We have the book cover, and it's just going to get awkward trying to shoehorn this in. Do we make the cover too small? Yeah. And then, the problem then when you put in a small book cover is it's not always apparent that this is an ad for a book. And you might think that's strange, but it's a common problem with Facebook ads where, there was a trend a few years ago not to put the book cover in at all. Well, that trend comes and goes, to be honest. And the problem is when you don't put in the book cover, often you get more clicks. So you get a higher CTR, you get a lower cost per click. So it looks like your ad is doing much better. And then you see a drop off in conversions because a lot of people click on it. Maybe they think it's a poster for a Hallmark movie, or maybe they think it's something else altogether, and they don't realize it's a book. And then when they get to Amazon, they just click away. So I always like to make it abundantly clear in every ad and every promo graphic that this is an ad for a book, because I only want the right people clicking. Overall, I think that brings down the cost per acquisition, like the cost per sale, but also it's not good to send lots of traffic to your Amazon page that doesn't end up converting. That does feed into how the algorithm works on Amazon. And you want to send qualified traffic to your Amazon page. You want to send the most likely purchasers. And I think it's a good mindset to get in with your marketing. You tend to be less scattergun in your marketing if you have that kind of laser beam focus on, I'm going to find my ideal readers, I'm going to find my target market, and I don't care about anyone else. And if I repel everyone else, great, they're no good to me. Okay, now, so we could do something like this, right? But let's try something else altogether. Let's see if we can find some background art where we're not awkwardly covering up the man here or the legs of the lady, which makes it look like she's been in some kind of accident. It just doesn't look right. Okay. And sometimes, okay, maybe if with a bit of fussing around, and if I pull the photo over here and I did this, I could probably maybe find some way if I zoomed in on the most important part of the clench, the kissing, if you ask me. Maybe that could work, maybe that's not so bad. But, other romance authors and other authors will be faced with a situation where they can't do that. There's just no way of getting the book cover in without it looking awkward. So let's just try and find another solution here. And the solution is, as you might have guessed, to go for a stock photo. Now, I'm not going to try and find a stock photo with a couple in a clench that looks exactly like these guys. That's a pretty tall order. But maybe we can just get some nice background and then just zoom in on the book cover and have the book cover take up most of the space. So let's just put in Rocky Mountains. Now, what you want to do here, the challenge is not so different from working with an illustrated cover, in the sense that you want to match the vibe. You want to match the style. So you don't want something that's a different kind of palette or a different vibe from the photo that is being used in the background of your book cover. Same with the illustration. Like if you're an epic fantasy author and you have a lovely piece of art for your illustrated cover, but you can't use it for the background, and you're searching here, you want to find something that's a similar style. If you have a clash of styles, that'll be very off-putting and it won't look professional. So here for this romance cover, we have a nice, it looks like an spring or autumn scenario here. We have a little bit of snow on the mountains, not so much. And it's nice and sunny and the colors are bright. So we want to kind of match that here. So we don't want anything too wintry, or we don't want anything too kind of cinematic and washed out. And that's actually the Himalayas, I think you can see there. So the search isn't perfect, but there is some good filters on the side here. So I think what's happening is it's picking up the word mountains there. And if you put like quotes around it, you might get it to drill in a little more. But you can check just looking at the description. So like, this is Canada. And you probably want to be authentic, although it's not. You're probably not going to get called out for using a different mountain unless it's something very famous that readers recognize. But it's good if you can to use something authentic. And you do have filters on the side here, by the way, where you can exclude AI content if you want to do that. And I actually do want to do that. I'm not crazy about it, and that's putting it mildly. You can pick any season here, so this is nice. Now, not all photographers have tagged their photos, and not all the stock photos in the database are tagged correctly. So this could limit your selection a lot, but sometimes it's very helpful. So let's say I wanted to say autumn, which is European for fall. So you get some more autumnal pictures there. Or if you pick winter, you're probably going to get a lot more snowy ones, and summer they'll be a lot brighter, presumably. Yeah. So I actually like these kind of summer brighter ones, and I think that fits the tone of the picture a little bit better. That's lovely, but it's in Slovakia. And I'm just going to have a little peek through here. All of these actually are in different places. Let me see what I can find. And that's the Canadian Rockies. You probably get away. Okay, let's try putting in Colorado mountains. Let's try this out because I think it looks pretty similar to what's going on. Okay, now something like that could work. Okay, so I found a stock photo, this one here, which I think is a little more suitable. Let's get rid of this background here. So this one actually is from the Rockies. I think it's Aspen, somewhere around there. And the first thing I like to do is zoom in the appropriate amount, which is probably, we want a little bit of water, not too much. We want a lot of that sky. Probably the fall colors on the right are a bit more interesting. And let's just move it back. And then it's a question of where you put the cover. And those mountains are actually very similar. So I think you always want to show the more interesting and more contrasty, if that's a word, uh, part of the photo, which I believe is the right hand side here. So I would put the cover on the left. Um, yeah, maybe something like this, I think could work quite well. And so it is a lighter and brighter sky in the book cover itself. And that's good actually, because it means the book cover will pop more out of the background, which could be a danger otherwise if you match it too much. But even still, we will go in and put our little glow around the book cover just to give that extra bit of lift off the background. And positioning the book cover itself is generally just about trial and error and what feels and looks right. But generally, I like to keep like the margins here and here more or less the same. I don't like to have the book cover like floating in the middle. I think that never looks right. I think you're better off putting it in one corner or the other and not in the air. I never think that looks right. I like to put it in the bottom left or the bottom right. I think that looks best. Otherwise, it just looks a little unnatural. Something about that composition, our brains complain, or mine does anyway. Maybe your brain is different. It's entirely possible. Anyway, I'm not wild about this little bit of driftwood or whatever that is there, but we'll let it slide because we don't have all day. And all we've left to do here is to put in a price tag. And I usually follow the same things here. And I'll try not to be cheesy and put in a heart-shaped price tag like I did the last time I did one of these for a romance book. I will use red though, because not only is it the color of love, it also is the color of danger. So our eye is attracted to it for various reasons. And we do want to stop the scroll. So we will use it unless we can't. So I would probably use red in about 70% of the ad images that I make, and the remaining 30%, probably 28% of the remainder, I would use bright yellow. So I only use bright yellow if bright red won't work. It just does so much better. And if you don't believe me, feel free to test it yourself. So let's say we're also doing $1.99 on this. Always do white text on red background. It just stands out so much more. Select the text first, then click white. And there we go. Let's adjust this slightly. Now I'm going to copy that and do my $sign again, because I like doing them separately so I can make the $sign sooner. Same goes for a cent sign or a pence sign if you're doing an ad for a UK audience. And by the way, if you are making an ad for a UK audience or any international audience, always go the extra mile and make a separate ad image with their local currency. You'd be surprised how much of a difference that makes in terms of response rate. And just readers like when people put in that extra bit of thought. But I think also when if somebody from the UK sees an ad and it has a $sign in it, sometimes they think the deal won't be active for them. You know, it's not all deals, especially if they're used to traditional publishing, not all deals will be international. And people in foreign countries are quite used to seeing an ad for some deal and then finding out it's only in America. So it's a great way to tell them, no, this deal is available for you. You should grab it now, but just by using the pound sign or whatever the local currency sign is. It's usually $1 in most English language speaking markets. So that's pretty easy. It's just the UK who are awkward with their pound signs, but I do like to take the trouble to put them in. So again, this is pretty basic ad. You would probably want to put in something down here, or maybe like a band. Oh, that's one way we could get rid of that unsightly bit of natural rubbish. We can put a little banner down the bottom here. Let's move that forward. Yeah, and then we got room here to put in, like, 5 stars, best romance novel ever, or whatever nice juicy quote you can find from your Amazon reviews. Um, I do feel like there's a bit too much of a gap up the top here. That's another place where you can potentially put a banner, and then you can move your price tag down there. I don't like to have the two elements too close to each other. I think it just looks better this way. So that's one way you can fill in that space if the gap feels or unnatural to you. You have a variety of options here, but yeah, you can put in like a little review quote, some tagline to really nail down on the tropes. I think when I took a quick look at the blurb, um, Giulia has all the tropes down here. I think you see that a lot with romance novels, where they will explicitly tell you what the tropes are because the readers want to know. Um, that's one thing that probably doesn't translate across genres. But the principle of communicating the genre and the subgenre, the niche, is one that is universal. And I would urge you, anytime you're filling in little things like this, anytime you're writing ad text, you're writing an email to your readers, you're writing the copy for your website, double down on genre, triple down on genre every single opportunity you get. So that's what I would put here. I would go through the reviews. I would pick out something which really doubles down on the genre, that mentions one of these tropes that the book covers. Steam level hot. So she's already done that to a certain extent with the title. If you could double down again with the quote, a reviewer mentioning how spicy the book is, you can't go wrong with that. And especially because Facebook, as I'm sure all romance novelists will know, they're like a lot of tech companies, they're incredibly prudish. You can barely show someone's clavicle without getting the ban hammer coming down on you. So even for a spicy novel like this, you have what might look like a more chaste cover. So you've really got to use these other elements to communicate the spice level. So take every opportunity you can get to really nail the subgenre. Okay, so that is the third and final cover of the day, because I need to eat a sandwich. Let me just reiterate that if you need to get stock photos, the cheapest way to do it is from Deposit Photos, but not from them directly. And you see, they have this reasonably good deal on at the moment, which is €65 for 100 images. That's way cheaper than the sticker price. The sticker price is crazy. It's like €300 or $350 or something like that, or $300, $350. Don't pay that. That's crazy money. Much better to go to AppSumo during Black Friday, at least, when the deal is on. They do this deal like twice a year, and everyone always jumps all over it. They usually do it around the spring or start of summer, and then they do it around Black Friday. And it's always one of the most popular deals that they run, because it's one of the biggest stock photo sites out there. The other big one is Shutterstock, but they're way more expensive. And it's a massive selection, 300 million or so photos. So you can pretty much find anything you're looking for, anything you want there. And the best part in my mind is that you don't have to worry about using them in any kind of commercial sense on your website or anything else. These are already cleared rights-wise. You can use the images commercially, as you can see here, and you can click on that and read all about the license situation if you want to. Don't just use free photos off the internet. You can get in big trouble. You can get sued. You might have a winning Facebook ad, and you find out you have to pull the ad because you're not allowed to use the image. That's a horrible thing to do. But even worse is to get sued. I know a couple of indie authors who had to pay money to people like Getty Images, several $1,000s, just because they used a free photo in a blog post. So that's a real stinger. You don't want to get involved in one of those situations. Always use photos, whether it's from Deposit Photos or someone else, that you know you have the rights to. Don't just use something because you found it on the internet. Now, there are free stock photo sites, and they will say they're royalty free and all that, but go to somewhere like, do a reverse image search on anything. So let's say you do go to one of these sites like Unsplash or one of those, and they say this is clear, this is free, you're allowed to use it for whatever you want. Check. Go to TinEye, go to Google, put in the image, and make sure it's not something that you actually need to pay for, because you will end up paying a lot more down the road if you use something without permission. So stay safe out there. Okay, guys, that's it for today. We only did 3 covers today, but we'll do a lot more in the next episode of the Image Workshop. So make sure to subscribe for that.